Joining us for this YSP webinar sponsored by Interlogix, Honeywell, Access Communications, System Sensor, and Vivint. I'm Jacqueline Shawn, Business Development Manager for the Electronic Security Association, as well as the Staff Liaison for the ESA Professional Group. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. All callers will be muted for the duration of this webinar, so please make sure to use your question or chat log to submit your questions, and we will be sure to address all the questions at the end of the webinar. Additionally, a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be found on the resource library on the YSP group page at esaweb.org. Today's webinar on hiring sales superstars is presented by Mary Jezioro and Don Hahn of the Security Business Institute. A couple of background notes on our speakers. Mary is Vice President of the Shield Security Systems Group of Companies and is President of the Security Business Institute. With over 20 years' experience in corporate branding strategies, Mary partners her passion for human relations and motivating individuals to succeed to help leaders hone their skills to create dynamic and prosperous work environments. Having previously worked in ad sales as well as marketing campaign development and management, Mary knows how to effectively create and communicate value throughout the sales process. Our next speaker, Don Hahn, is Vice President of the Security Business Institute and serves as the Chief Learning Officer. Don has over 25 years of experience in sales and executive management, including operating a training and coaching company dedicated to the development of organizations that are committed to excellence and growth in their industry. He is also a certified Franklin Covey coach, as well as an author and owner of a reliable interviewing tool entitled Hire, H-I-R-E, which improves candidate selection. Don is past president of the Buffalo Niagara Sales and Marketing Executives, a member of the American Society for Training and Development, and the International Coaching Federation. Now, without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mary and Don.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Hey, today we're going to talk about creating a dynamic organization. Hiring salespeople is probably the trickiest role of a manager, and we're going to dive into that today. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Don Hahn, who is an expert in sales training, and he's going to share some of his experience with us about how to create a dynamic team, which is particularly important as we look into the next year and how we can make our teams better.
Thanks, Mary. I'd like to just talk a little bit about what we're trying to achieve today, and the title of the webinar is Hire a Sales Superstar. And as Mary said, it is a tough thing to do. All of us have been in a position where we've hired salespeople, we've fired salespeople, and it's a very difficult process to find the characteristics and traits of a good sales rep. They may look good, but in the end, they just have some areas where they falter. So before we get going, we're going to conduct a poll. I'm going to talk it over. I'm going to pass it over to Jacqueline, and she's going to post this poll where we'd like to determine the average cost of hiring a poor sales rep. And I'd like you to respond to this. Jacqueline, if you would, turn it over to the folks so they could do the poll. So the question is, do you see the average cost of a poor sales rep costing you half of their annual salary? Is it equal to their annual salary, or is it something north of that, let's say 2 times their salary? What's been your experience? If you would just answer one, respond to this poll.
Okay, the poll results are in. 25% say half, 38% say their annual salary, and 38% say twice their salary.
Okay, great. That's about what we hear generally. And the sad reality is that on average it's 2 times their salary. There are a lot of hidden costs in hiring the wrong people. Sure, there's the cost of their salary. There's the opportunity cost, though, of the sales reps not selling and not producing. So there's underutilization. Thirdly, there's the time and effort that you and your people spend in developing that person, only to find out in the end that they fail. And quite frankly, I want you to think about this, but probably within the first week that you've hired someone, don't you really know whether or not you made a good decision? But what happens is we don't want to go back there and try to find somebody because we don't know what we're looking for. We already got somebody that's fair, and we're afraid that the devil we know is worse or is better than the devil we don't. So we're going to explore today. We're going to look first at why do salespeople fail, and there's several reasons why they fail. So if we look at why salespeople fail, it'll help us to better understand what makes them successful. Then we're going to talk about what are the key characteristics of great sales performers, and how do you identify them? Because it's not easy to identify them, especially in a half-hour or one-hour interview. We're also going to share some hiring horrors that we've seen firsthand and how you can avoid them. Then we're going to speak a little bit to the essential ingredients of what a reliable hiring process is. And this is a process that we've built over the years that's pretty ironclad. So before we get going, I just want to make the statement that you really can't judge a book by its cover. If you look through this picture here, you may notice some people, and the guy in the bottom left corner is Bill Gates. So Microsoft 1973, if you just looked at this crew, you got to ask yourself, at face value, would you hire these people? And I'd have to say that if you had hired them, we probably wouldn't be on this call right now. So first impressions can be deceiving. So I guess there's 4 truths that we have found regarding hiring. And the first and foremost one is that you must understand there isn't a single moment in your career when you have more to gain or lose than when you hire someone. It is the most important part of your job. You have salespeople that work for you. The most important thing is to find the right ones. The second truth that we found is that the toughest hire is a sales professional. Why? Because they're professional interviewers. They know how to do it. So we give them hypothetical questions, they lick their chops, and they look like stars. So we don't know how to do that interviewing. We're notoriously ill-prepared to conduct that interview. Why? Because we don't do it often. Maybe you do it once a year, maybe twice a year. But the point is that it's not in our wheelhouse. We've not developed the competencies in areas where we do this as a repeated process because it's an infrequent event. And the fourth truth, and the thing I really have highlighted, is that character trumps skills every single time. We hire for skills, and we have to stop doing that. We hire for experience. We feel that, okay, this person has so much experience. They got this huge base, and they're going to bring it over. I'm sure you've been there. And when they come in, they don't bring on the base. But what they do bring on is all the issues and the problems that they've created over the 20 years of their sales experience. So understand, hire for character. It is the only thing to do. Now, as we have questions, if you have questions, I encourage you to jot them down because there will be an opportunity at the end to ask some questions. And apologize for the format, but it's pretty much, I'm kind of talking at you, and that's difficult, so I apologize. Now, we've also found, over the course of our time that salespeople fail for 7 primary reasons. Firstly, they have insufficient training. We bring them on, and they say they're salespeople, so we assume they know how to sell. Don't make that mistake. We don't provide the expectations up front. We bring them on, and we throw them to the wolves and say, go at it, and then 6 months later, we give them a quota. The day someone starts is the day they should have accountabilities. Third thing is they really didn't know how important their job was. It wasn't conveyed to them. And this is a leadership thing. It's essential that they know how what they do contributes to the overall success of the company, because people just want to be part of something. And the payoff for good performance was never conveyed. The standards weren't established, and the rewards for good performance were not really clearly understood, nor were the consequences for poor performance. Fifthly, the rep had no ownership. The goals established were established by you, not by them. So to whatever degree you're able, help the rep to establish their own sets of goals. They have to own them, because then everything is much simpler. Okay, if they don't own the goals and you do, it's like pushing a rope. Sixth, and most importantly, the sales rep had deficiencies that you didn't uncover or chose to dismiss at the time you hired them. Okay, we want them to work out, so they get this halo effect. They look better than they are because we're desperate. The issues that we see reps have is time management, call reluctance, a mismatch to the behaviors the job requires. They do not have a utilitarian value or a high need for attaining wealth and achievement, and they don't hold themselves personally accountable. And the seventh item is sales management. Sales management's management. So you manage the reps as a group. The reps have to be managed individually, because the group is only as good as its foundation, and the sales individual is the building block. So coaching them and developing is critical. So now we talked about truths regarding hiring, top reasons salespeople fail. And let's take a look at interview day, and we've all been there. Person comes in, and boy, they look the part. They're dressed well, they carry themselves well. Another person exudes all the confidence in the world. However, we don't look below the surface and find they're standing on a set of dominoes that are ready to tumble. And they come in and they look like Superman. Their resume looks great, and the confidence they exude is just incredible. So this is what they look like on interview day, because we have rose-colored glasses. Now, 3 to 6 months later, this is what we have. We have a sales rep that can't get out of their own way. They're not effective. They're scattered. They lack direction. We have another rep that just cannot get out of their way. They can't overcome the hurdles before them. Another one doesn't have the tools. They're up a creek without a paddle. One person's taken it to the bank. So out of these 6 people, one person's taken to the bank, and this other person has this roller coaster existence where they'll have a good month, then bad, good, then bad. And finally, we have the ostrich seller, the person that just ignores all of the bad characteristics or the trends they're seeing. They put their head in the sand and hope things go away. So all the blemishes that they had in the first interview are now manifesting themselves, and they're pretty serious. And had we noticed the blemish and chose not to ignore them, we wouldn't be in this situation. So our goal is to keep you hiring the right people and ensure you don't hire the wrong ones. So let's talk about what are the key characteristics, what we found great performers are, and how you can identify them. And we have a lot of assessment tools we use, but let's just talk a little bit about a DISC assessment. And we have done a lot of benchmarks across the United States with a whole bunch of different roles here, from accounting to customer service. But as we look at it and we hone down to sales, inside salespeople, outside salespeople, and in fact sales management, we see out of these 8 various criteria that we look at, we see 3 that are critical to top performers for each respective group. So sales manager has to be comfortable with frequent interaction. They've got to be versatile. They've got to be customer oriented above all else. An outside sales rep has to have a real sense of urgency. They've got to have a competitive desire to succeed, and they've got to also be customer-oriented. Finally, the inside sales rep, who is the person that's handling more of the transactional piece, has to enjoy frequent interactions. They have to have good customer orientation, and they've got to be accustomed to frequent change and be able to think on their feet. And this is just one sampling, but we find that these are good guidelines. And this is just topical stuff that we've gleaned over the years. Okay? So let's go on and look at when we evaluate people. The fact is that people only perform in a manner consistent with their self-concept. You can't see their self-concept in an interview. They can adjust. They can morph. They can fake it for a half an hour or an hour. But what they can't fake, okay, is their underlying attitudes and values. We have tools that will help us find the attitude. The behavior is what they do and how disciplined they are, how goal-oriented they are, and the tactics or the techniques are what they do. The issue is that most of us hire to technique. Why? Because it's the easy thing to see and observe. Behavior is much more difficult to get at because it's the habits they've developed, it's their discipline, it's how they manage their time, how they deal with resistance, how they deal with rejection. And their attitude is what gets them out of bed in the morning. And you cannot see behaviors and attitude in an interview. You can maybe get an idea of what it is, but you can certainly see technique. You can observe that. But the two most important, which is behavior and primarily their attitude and motivation, you can't see. So how do we get to that? Our experience has shown us that these are the critical elements of success that someone has to possess to be successful in sales. Their behaviors, they've got to have a strong sense of urgency, competitiveness. They've got to be customer-oriented, and they've got to be able to make frequent change. You do not want someone who doesn't like their cheese moved. Attitude, you want someone who has a utilitarian attitude. They want a return on investment in everything they do. They will not do anything unless they get an ROI. You want someone individualistic, someone who wants that, they want the esteem, they want recognition, they want a pat on the back, they're driven to rewards. And you also want someone, particularly in our industry, that's theoretical because you do have a technical product set. However, be careful because if they're too theoretical and that supersedes their utilitarian, you're going to have a very good product manager or installation tech, but not a salesman. So it's a very complex connection. Finally, the technique, that third piece of the triangle, these are the competencies that you want. You want someone who's a self-starter. You want someone who's resilient. When they get knocked down, they're getting up and they're getting up swinging. You want someone who can manage their own self, and you want someone who's absolutely oriented to results. And these are things that we can identify. Okay? Some of you may know what DISC, you've heard of DISC profiling. These are psychometric assessments. You've heard of Myers-Briggs. And these are assessments that we use that there's really basically three types of salespeople that we run into. Those who are hunters, they'll open the door. Those who are farmers, those are people that are great at nurturing and developing and caring for your accounts. In fact, some of your inside people are some of your best farmers. And the large accounts, those are the ones that are complex, they've got a lot of moving parts, many decision makers, competition is tough. And we can identify where you want to be. For instance, if you're looking for a hunter, you want them in this quadrant up here, that someone who's very assertive and direct, they're fearless. Whereas you want a farmer, you want them down here in a supporting role, someone who is going to be nurturing. They're going to be very empathetic, very caring. They'll go the extra yard. People consider them helpful and thoughtful and conscientious. Large accounts, you need some traits where people can negotiate, move through, and they'll fall right in this middle area up in here. I lost my mouse, up in here. This area that's in the purple here, that is no man's land. You do not want to hire a sales rep that falls in this category, because less than 8% of the people in this category are successful in sales. The majority of successful salespeople fall in the white. So you may have a great technician, but they won't be able to sell. And that's what we see all the time in this business. Okay, so let's move on, talk a little bit about the hiring wars, the problems that we see. And these are the things we see time and time again. And I just encourage you to maybe take a look at this and reflect back and see if there's some areas you can successfully implement. First thing is hiring from a position of desperation. Okay, we wait too long until we're desperate. Ill-defined selection criteria. You haven't defined what you want. The questioning techniques are very superficial. You don't have pre-prepared questions. You're not ready. So you create questions you think will work. You spend way too much, you rely too much on the results of the interview, because interviews are, they're notoriously flawed. You don't do the reference check. I know they're hard to do, but you got to find a way to do it, and we have ways. You have got to check the references and also the backgrounds. And failure to validate what you observe using objective testing, because your interview is extremely subjective. There's a lot of bias built into it. So here's the steps we recommend in an effective hiring process. Number one, prioritize your open positions. Look at your strategic plan and figure out what's missing. You either have to top grade your staff, which means you want to make sure that you're improving the sales staff, or you got to hire new ones. The top grade is a replacement. Secondly, establish selection criteria. This is the part we all miss. Do you have a good job description and comp model? Have you identified the cash account they have to have? Cash stands for knowledge, and we'll cover this in a little bit. Knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. Those are the characteristics they have to bring to the table, because if they don't have them, you're not going to give them to them. Create a hire template. Hire is a process that HIRE, how to interview and recruit for excellence, is the template that will identify specifically the criteria and the questions that you need answered to see if this person fits. And the final thing here is key accountabilities. There's probably 4 or 5 things that a particular job position, whether they're service, sales, management, leadership, installer, there's maybe 4 or 5 key things that they absolutely have to excel at. Have you defined them? Do you know exactly what they are and how to determine whether or not they can achieve those accountabilities? Then you recruit to the benchmark that you've established in number 2. You collaborate on the selection. Then you bring them on. And this is where really the hard part starts. You have a strong, robust onboarding process. Most people just throw them to a salesperson because they don't have time. They follow the salesperson along. They learn all the less than desirable habits. Why? Because we don't have time. But in fact, there's nothing more important than making sure that person who will help us succeed in our business is successful. So again, the essential ingredients of a reliable hiring process, there's really 3 key things that we cover. The first is establishing a job description, establishing the key accountabilities of that position, and then identifying the knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits, the attributes that that person has, the skills required. So this is the next poll that we have, Jackie, if you would put that up. And the question is, do you have a current job description? And have you identified the key performance metrics of the job before you hire? So please take a moment and do that poll. The question is, do you have a current job description? And you've identified the key performance metrics that the job has.
Okay, it looks like 43% have said yes, 57% have said no.
43 yes, 57 no.
We're still polling 38% yes, 63% no.
Okay. Those numbers aren't far off from when we do these polls. Most people, the job description has got to be tight, because the job description tells them what the boundaries of their job is, with clear certainty. The second is the key performance metrics identifies the top 5 accountabilities that if they're going to be successful, they have to be able to do these 4 or 5 things. And the questions you ask in the interview have got to go back to those key performance metrics. You want to inspect what you expect. So if we go back, are we back on the slides, Jackie?
Yep, your screen can be seen.
You see our screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the assessing and benchmark process, which is one of those critical steps. What we look for is the cash account that someone has. And their comfort zone, just like with the behavior, attitude, and techniques, is born of the knowledge they possess, the attitude they bring to the table. That's really what gets them out of bed in the morning, so their attitude and values. The skills they possess, which is their proficiency in in the tactics and the skills you require, and the habits are the acquired behavior, which is actually a representation of their behavioral motivation. But the most important thing in all of this is really the attitude. You want to hire for attitude. You can train for knowledge, you can train for skills, you can coach for habits, but you have got to hire for the right attitude. Okay? If they don't have the right attitude, now I'm saying their motivation. Are they utilitarian? Are they individualistic? There's about 6 motivators, and they have to have the right one, or I can pretty much assure you they won't make it. So now we get to the interview and what we have to do. And the goals of the interview are pretty straightforward. There's about 9 of them, but we get all mixed up. You want to decide, first and foremost, does the candidate move on? You're not in a position to say yay or nay in that interview as to whether or not they're hired. All you're trying to do is vet your candidates. And you should have about 10 candidates you're interviewing, get it down to 5, then do assessments and hire them based on that. So decide if the candidate moves on. Observe and assess the overall demeanor of the candidate. How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they handle stalls? How do they handle stress? How do they do at building rapport? Because they have to do that with their clients. What's their ability to respond to questions and objections? What's their ability to improvise? What's the match between their skills and the primary functional indicators of the job? What's their match to the profile you've created for their behaviors, attitudes, and techniques? And do they fit your culture? Now, the bottom line is that you've got to find as much data as you can. Okay, so you've got to find ways to determine this. And I do things such as how do they treat the receptionist when they set up a meeting? How are they in terms of their time management, their resume, their presentation? How do they deal with objections you give them? Okay, many times I'll tell somebody they're not a good fit for the job just to see how they respond to that objection, and it's very telling. because don't you want them to be able to cover an objection? So here's the keys. Number one, establish the benchmark and hire to that. Get behavioral-based interviewing. You have got to have behavioral-based interviewing. Have a set of pre-prepared questions, and we have a list of 60 pages of them. Understand that you have to be EEOC compliant, Equal Employment Opportunity compliant, because everybody on this call can go to jail for discrimination. You're not protected from that. So know the laws and be pre-prepared with EEOC compliant questions. Get as much data as you can and validate what you're looking for. Find out how they're built and does that fit what you're looking for. And the point is, inspect what you expect. If you expect somebody to overcome call reluctance, put them in that position. If you expect someone to put on a good face after waiting in a lobby for 15 minutes, have them wait. It sounds harsh, but you're actually in a position where you're selecting the most critical asset you have. Now, we get to the final piece, which is assessing and making decisions. You have to collaborate notes. There should be 3 sets of eyeballs. There's 3 sets, not 3 eyeballs. 3 sets of eyeballs on each candidate. You wanted to identify all the gaps and collaborate to make sure that there are no gaps. You want to use a valid and reliable assessment tool like the DISC. Absolutely check the references. I could tell you horror stories, but I won't. That's over a beer or something. And you extend an offer. The offer has to be contingent upon the references. Now, we adhere to what we call a 30-30-30-10 rule. Your decision should be based on these 4 criteria. 30% of your final selection should be influenced by the assessment results. The assessment results will tell you how the person's built, not how they interview. Okay, hold on. Okay, so 30% should be based on assessment results. Then 30% is background information reference checks. A lot of us are foregoing this because it's very difficult and people have been coached what to say. The people that haven't been coached what to say are the people back in the sales room that work with the person. So find a way to get to that person. 30% should be based on the interview results, but it's got to be a good interview, a reliable interview. And then 10% has to be looking at the fit to the company's culture and values. If they don't fit your culture and values, it won't work, no matter how good they are. So now we're going to go to the next poll, Jackie, and the last poll. And we'd like you to check mark all of these that apply. And you can check mark up to 3, I think. I have pre-prepared standard interviewing questions. If you have those, check it. Each person has weekly performance objectives on the day they are hired, not 6 months later. I use objective behavioral assessments in the hiring process. DISC, PI, Divine, one of those. And the other thing you can check is if all of these are you doing, click on all of the above. If you're not doing any of them, click on none of the above. So please take a minute and fill out this poll. We got a couple more minutes to go, but Jackie, how's the poll?
Okay, we had 90% vote. So 22% have a pre-prepared standard, have standard interview questions. 11% have weekly performance objectives on the day of hire. 33% use objective behavioral assessments in the process. 11% all of the above, and 44% none of the above.
Okay. All right. Again, that's not far from what we see generally when we do this, but I can't stress enough that these 3 things, pre-prepared standard interview questions that are based on what you're looking for, okay, that are EEOC compliant, weekly performance objectives. The day someone is hired, you can't expect them to have quota, but you can expect them to do 4 or 5 things the first week, 5 or 6 things the second week. So having objectives week over week that will ensure that at their 3 or 6 month anniversary, they're doing it. And then objective behavioral assessments, I have found that these are invaluable. You really should be using some type of behavioral assessments and make sure, again, that they're valid and reliable. Okay, so let's talk about hire. And hiring for success means you're creating standard, scalable processes. Everybody in your organization who hires should follow the same process. You shouldn't be winging it. The bigger the organization, the more disparity. Your interviewing questions have got to be well crafted. Don't just try to trip them up in the last minute. Identify what a good fit is in advance and then hire to that. And then fourthly and finally, establish rigorous criteria to minimize false positives. I would rather you said no to 3 salespeople that could make it, but you choose not to hire them, than you say yes to 1 candidate who you think can make it but can't. That's how strongly I believe in this process. So please, don't hire unless you're 100% sure. So a few things. Begin with the end in mind. Recruit only great salespeople. Identify perfect candidates. Avoid contentment. And by contentment, oh, there we go. Well, just click through. Okay. Okay. Don't hire when you're in doubt. Do sales testing. Go too fast.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Pre-employment sales testing should be done. Do effective interviewing and get trained on it if you need it. Consider your culture. If you're looking to stretch your culture, this is the time to do it. It's not the time to stretch it to the point where it breaks. Don't operate from a desperate state, because people always look better than they are. And finally, prepare for the interview as if it's the single most important thing you do, because in fact, it really is. So, as we go ahead.
Try this. There we go.
Yeah. Here's some resources you can look at. Top Grading by Brad Smart. He's the one that taught Jack Welch how to top grade the organization. Followed up with the book Top Grading Salespeople a few years later, a great book on hiring salespeople. And if you go to our website, and you can download white papers on hiring, they're white papers that we've created. And these are the places you want to go. And these are the types of things that we as an organization provide, anything regarding sales, training, oversight, strategic planning, hiring and recruiting, and integrating sales and marketing. And finally, if you're interested in free personalized training or support, you want to know how you can obtain that, contact us. And I guess with that, what we'd like to do is turn this over to any questions that are out there. We'll turn it over to Jackie, but we want to leave with the thought that a leader can give up anything except final responsibility. You still own it. Jackie?
Yes, hello again, everyone. If you joined us late, please keep in mind that all callers are on mute, so please use your questions log to submit questions. In the meantime, Dawn and Mary, a couple have come in. First question acknowledges that this information is geared towards new hires, but what about the salespeople they already have? What can they do to hold them accountable?
It's a good question. I think that the main thing is that if you define what the job is all about, and you have salespeople that already work for you, I would look at how they're performing against this benchmark. And the first thing you want to do is determine the people you have, how many people are doing it, how many people can do it, how many people are unwilling to do it. And from there, you can then make your decisions whether you invest in developing them or you're at a point where you have to top grade, which is improving your sales organization from the outside. But I think that if you benchmark what the key accountabilities for a salesperson are, and you've identified the key criteria that they should possess, you should absolutely be coaching them to that. I mean, I'm a certified coach. Mary and I, we believe that on a weekly basis, you should deal with your people to help them understand what their gaps are and help them take ownership about how can we improve our skill sets. So there's a continuous improvement plan. So that was a good question.
Okay, the next question, you mentioned that Security Business Institute offers a lot of white papers on this subject. Do you actually offer a service to help hire and train sales staff?
Yeah, absolutely. For the last 30 years, that's what I've been doing, and Mary's been doing it. We've actually got a process and a website that will help you to recruit and hire salespeople. And we do that. And it's a little non-conventional because we really do a good job of preparing for exactly what we want. A lot of recruiters will just throw people over the fence because they've got raw materials that they have and they have an inventory that they're trying to unload. We don't do that. We identify what we're looking for and we go find them. So another good question.
Okay, last question. Where do we find people? Do you recommend Craigslist, Monster, other personal networks?
Okay, great. Craigslist has always been pretty good over the last couple of years. Of late, LinkedIn has probably become the very best source. It's flooded with recruiters. So if you use it, I can assure you you'll be getting calls from recruiters. But I would also go to your people and give them a spiff. If they can find someone that they know of in the community that they bring to you, and after a period of time, let's say 6 months, that person's still there, they get a $500 or $1,000 finder's fee. And why that's important is that nobody knows better the culture of your organization than someone that's already working there. So there's a multitude of places. You also can find young folks coming out of school that have some exceptional character, but they don't have the skills. So you just have to determine, what it is you're looking for, and then we can sort of guide you with where you want to go to find them. But those are all good sources.
Okay. All right. If there are no more questions, I'd like to once again thank Don and Mary, of course. And I'd like to remind everyone that a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be available in the resource library on the YSP group page at the ESA website. That's esaweb.org. Once again, thanks for participating in today's webinar. Our sponsors today are Interlogix, Honeywell, Axis Communications, System Sensor, and Vivint. We definitely appreciate your time and hope that you found the content useful. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
Thank you.